is it? The Public Safety Standing Committee for the City of Annapolis is called to order. It is 6:41 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Good evening, everyone. Roll call. Alderman Gay.
Present.
Alderwoman O'Neill is not present. She had a community meeting that she was called for. Approval of the agenda and any items of the agenda should be made here. We're going to make an adjustment to the amendment ID 2525. No Harm VIP NAM update will be removed. They will be presenting to us either quarterly or triannually, and they came in January. So that will be removed from the agenda. So with that being said, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with amendment?
And OEM.
No, we will have OEM.
So,
We will have OEM.
so move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I hear no opposition. Moving on to business and miscellaneous, approval of the minutes, PSC 13025, special meeting minutes, and PSC 21325, special meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So move.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? I hear none. Next on the general discussion, ID 3625, Office of Emergency Management Update, OEM. And Ms. Jackson here, who's our city council associate, will be stepping in for OEM. We've had several unfortunate matters to occur. 2024, 2022. So in 2023, we had 9. Citywide, Ward 8 reported the lowest number of overdoses. Ward 5 and 7 were tied for the lowest 2 each. 0 fatal were reported in Ward 8, and also 0 overdoses reported in Wards 1 and 7. Narcan usage was reported to have been used in 60% of overdoses in Ward 8. And you can see the bar chart to the right and the comparisons of overdoses, fatal, and use of Narcan. Ms. Jackson. Locations for 2024, 1 on 6th and 7th, Severn Avenue, 2 at Bay Ridge Avenue, and 2 at Madison. 80% of them were along or within 2 blocks of Madison Street. And thank you, Alderman Arnett. Thank you. Next screen. Demographics. Overdoses by age group in Ward 8 historically. We can see the numbers, ages 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and looks like 45 to 54 had most, with 2 number of overdoses in that age bracket. And by race, Black African American, it looks like 80% was the largest group. However, 6 of the last 10 years, the largest group has been the white population. In 2024, 65% of all overdoses in the city were African American. And the number of overdoses is, as you can see, 5 for African American and 1 white. Next slide. Fatalities, and that's something we try to prevent. 0 fatalities in 5 of the last 10 years citywide. Reported the lowest number since 2018. And you can see the bar chart. Ward 2 with 5, Wards 3 and 4 with 2, and Wards 5 and 6 with 1 each. None in Ward 1, none in Wards 7 and 8. When you look at citywide fatal overdoses, looks like 9 for African American Black, 2 white. And that's considered the largest group. And that's the pie chart. For the next bar chart, fatal overdoses by age, 55 to 64 is the age range, and there were 5 in that category. 4 and then 1 and 1. Food Fridays, and this is something that Alderwoman O'Neill has been spearheaded for the city. And as you know, as some of you may know, this is a program that was started several years ago with about 200 persons who received a box of free food on Fridays. It has grown to approximately 275. It contains fresh and canned fruits and vegetables, frozen meat, rice, pasta, and other non-perishables. It's open to everyone who wishes to take advantage of that program. Rec and Parks has provided the workspace, however, last summer. I know that Alderwoman O'Neill had to move it to the Eastport Fire Station due to space consideration. The food is provided by Anne Arundel County Food Bank. And again, she's the organizer of the food. And we're looking at mainly fresh food and non-perishables, healthy meals. Ward 8 Food Friday statistics: 16 families, 52 individuals, 8 seniors, and 17 children. Americana Drive residents: 27 individuals and 5 families, which accounts for 31.3% of the deliveries in Ward 8. And they're ably represented by Alderman Ron Arnett. Okay. Food Friday recipients on the map. We're looking at several streets in Ward 8. President Severn, Eastern Chesapeake, Americana, Madison, Bay Ridge, Windsor, Boucher, and Norman Drive. It looks like Americana Drive, and then Madison Court and Norman Drive seem to be those who receive the most in Ward 8. Thank you. I may not be able to answer the questions, but I will try. Maybe Alderman Arnett can. Anyone have any questions concerning the Office of Emergency Management? They've been hit with some, like I say, some critical staffing issues lately, and no one was available to come tonight. If you do have questions tonight, we'll try to answer them. If not, we can certainly submit them to Chief Simmons and his team, and certainly can give you the answers. Yes, Alderman Gay.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I'll submit this in writing. I'm just curious how a ward with the second lowest African American population in the city has the second highest overdose rate of African Americans. I don't think they're calculating the data appropriately, and so maybe that needs to be looked at. It doesn't make sense.
Maybe Alderman Arnett may have an insight or two.
Are there a significant portion of African American residents that I'm not aware of?
Well, just like the last pie chart, there's a lot of people in the Nautilus Point complex and a lot of people in Monroe that are lower income, and that tends to be where this kind of overdose occurs, and why we need to do reparations and
so much more. And I agree with that completely. I would, and see, that's one of my issues with data. The data should be appropriated to where the individual lives, not where the overdose occurs, and maybe it'll make my results go way up, but so be it. We'll have an appropriate account of where the overdose issues are. And I'm sure Kevin Director Simmons or Mary Kay will correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what we might want to do in the future is have both sets of numbers. We could certainly do that. Does anyone the audience have any questions or comments? Mr. Reichert, feel free to step on up to the microphone, sir. Microphone.
Just for a point of information.
Microphone. Podium, Mr. Reichert, the podium. That's fine.
Just for a point of information.
Mm-hmm.
Point of information. Sorry. What are we doing? Because I'm not familiar with this sort of presentation in a committee meeting. Are we doing public comment per department, or are we doing public comment 3 minutes, 1 block? Because we can't have everybody coming up here to speak 3 minutes for fire, police, and OEM. I'm sorry.
I guess that's the chair's decision.
Is it the chair's prerogatives,
Yes,
or is it
so.
Robert's rule?
Thanks, the chair's.
Okay.
But we'll see how it goes. Mr. Reichert, yes, your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Bill Reichart. I'm the president of the Eastport Civic Association. I live at 717 Bay Ridge Avenue in Eastport. Members of the committee, we had a number of issues that we wanted to bring to your attention, some questions and so forth.
Is this concerning OEM?
The only question I had about OEM is, can we get a copy of those slides?
Okay.
Or are they publicly posted already?
They're on Legislar on the website.
Okay.
Yes.
We did have some questions.
We can take the questions as we go through the departments.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. That's the only question I had.
Okay, certainly.
Thank you.
And if you need some assistance, Ms. Jackson can certainly point you in the right direction.
Very good.
I'll
Thank you.
get them. I'll get them. For you.
Okay, and Alderman Arnett will get them for you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Riker. Okay, next up is ID 3425, Annapolis Police Department update, APD. Good evening.
Oh, is that better? Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, we don't have a lot to do. We'll just run through the data.
Introductions, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry. To my immediate left is Captain Lamar Howard, the captain of operations. To my immediate right is Deputy Chief Stanley Branford, and to his immediate right is Captain Amy Miguez, who is the commander of the administration.
And who are you, sir?
Oh, and I'm Ed Jackson. I'm your chief of police for the city of Annapolis.
Thank you.
Wow. I know that because I read my name on my shirt. That's how I remember that.
That can be helpful, yes, in certain situations.
Where are we going to start at? We're going to start at with Ward 8 overall crime for 2024. And if you look at the first box right under 2024 crime counts by ward, that's the total crime. And it shows the ranking in the red letters. And of the 8 wards, Ward 8 ranks 4th. And the categories are ward by rank and by crime type. Motor vehicle theft, 1st, robbery, 1st, theft, 5th, burglary, 6th, ag assault or aggravated assault, 7th, homicide, 8th, and rape, 8th. And then if you look over to the immediate right, at the bar graph, it denotes crimes against people, crimes against persons. Your ranking is 6 out of the 8 wards. And then that would include robbery, homicide, rape. Those are all categories, crimes against persons, and I'll get into that in a minute. And then right beneath that, crimes against property. And if you look at the red lettering, you rank 3rd. Now, to further elaborate on that, Ward 8, we have incident counts, and it's broken into 2 categories. And keep in mind, the count is a little different than it has historically been, as I stated in the previous wards, in that we've gone to a NABRAS form of data collection, crime data collection. NABRAS, of course, is the acronym for the National Incident-Based Reporting System, versus what we've traditionally had for almost 100 years, and that's the Uniform Crime Reports. The difference is when we count some of these incidents, we're not counting it was a hierarchy and in the way that we counted crime. The hierarchy is that, say, for example, if we had a homicide, we never counted everything that led up to the homicide. So sometimes there's other crimes contained in the highest crime. So we only counted the homicide. For example, somebody's walking down the street, somebody points a gun. We didn't count the assault under the old system. They drag them in the alley. We didn't count the abduction. They rob them. We didn't count that. Then ultimately they shoot them and we find a deceased body. We only counted the homicide because in the hierarchy of crimes, that was the most serious one. Now under the National Incident-Based Reporting System, we count everything. If there's 5 crimes committed in one incident, we count that. So having said that, in Ward 8, tied for last year with Wards 2, 4, 5, and 6. If you see at the top, 1 homicides was 0. We had 1 rape tied for last in Ward 2, and that the rape was domestic related. Below that, aggravated assaults. And aggravated assaults, I believe in NABRAS, we count them more according to law. Aggravated assaults, just to be more explicit, are those types of assaults that the whole aim is to cause serious bodily harm up to attempted murder. That would be any use of a weapon, a gun, a knife, a cylindrical object like a baseball bat or a pipe, and somebody is either threatened with it or actually battered with it, then that would be an example of an aggravated assault. Did I leave anything out? Yeah, and the elements though. Did I capture the elements? Okay. And yes, and as Captain Howard, and he can elaborate anytime he wants to chime in, 40% of it, the assailants were known to the victims, domestic related. 4 domestic related, and the location, 7 were in the residence, the next line, 2 were on the street, and 1 is a business. Now, realistically, I have to say this, our biggest challenge when they're in the residence, that's more of a social problem. The ones that we can realistically be charged with that we probably, based on our ability to patrol the area, would be the streets. And if you look, we had 2 street assaults and 1 in a business. Those are open to the public. The ones in the house are generally domestic related, inability to resolve conflict and differences peacefully, and it escalates into violence. The next category is robbery. And of course, robbery is a crime against persons. Even though property is taken, it's by use of force or under the threat of force. That's what constitutes robbery. For example, we talked about NABRAS. Robbery has 2 elements to it. It has a theft element to it and a physical force element. When you put them together, you have robbery. So had 12 robberies in Ward 8, tied for first with Ward 6, and that's because you have a lot of borderline streets, especially along Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, that President Street corridor. A lot of them border with Ward 6. We had 1 domestic, and then the weapons, we had 8 by hands, 3 by firearms, and 1 with a knife. Moving on up to the next category in the T chart is burglary. Of course, burglary is a property crime. It's a crime against property. A burglary has 2 elements in it. The element of breaking and entering with the intent to commit some type of crime therein, generally theft, once they have forced their way in. And out of the 8 wards, Ward 8 was 6 out of the 8 wards. 2 were domestic. The type were 3 were residential, no force. We had 2 other ones that were residential with force. We had 1 business which was force, and we had 1 church was force. That means they used some type of object to gain entry, by breaking a window, prying the door open, but some type of physical force to use. And of course, 3 were at the top of the bullet, were no force, 3 residential with no force. I'll move down to the next category is theft. Had 89 total. They were 5th out of the 8 wards. 18 were from a motor vehicle. 37, I apologize. 37 were the result of shoplifting. 8 were from a building. 5 were from motor vehicle, was of motor vehicle parts. Generally, that was a theft from a vehicle. You have theft out of a vehicle, theft from a vehicle, and theft of an actual vehicle. 3 different categories of theft. The next one is 21. That's just all other, not mentioned. And then we had 0 pickpocketing. I'm glad to hear that, and 0 purse snatching. Last time we were here, we had in Ward 1, we had a couple of pickpockets down on Main Street. So watch your wallets everywhere. The last category is MVA theft, motor vehicle theft. You had 22. You were first out of the 8 wards. So your biggest challenge crime-wise, sir, is the thefts of vehicles. You were first out of the 8. We had 2 suspects known to the victim. 7 of the vehicles were unlocked but recovered. 10 were locked and recovered. 3 were locked, not recovered. and 2 unlocked and not recovered. So out of those 22, we still have 5 that were uncovered and 17 that were recovered.
Quick question, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think some of the locked ones, people may not have been totally candid, whether they had the doors locked or not?
That's a good question, and I can only give you a theoretical answer, and the theoretical answer is yes. I think a lot of times they want the report to reflect that they properly secured their vehicle for insurance purposes, because sometimes actuaries will raise their premium if the report reflects that they were careless or negligent in not securing it. So yeah, it's something that absence of us capturing the actual crime on CCTV, or having a good witness, says that that's not happening. They left the door open. We have to take their word for it that they secured their vehicle.
Alderman Arnett has a question.
Yes, sir.
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
I am very curious about this. I have a hard time understanding how a car can be stolen, locked, or unlocked unless they're older vehicles. On my car, it's a push button, and you have to have the fob with you, but it also is locked. So I think it would be interesting to know how these are actually happening physically, so we can relay it back to the community. How does it actually work?
Well, my captain has said something interesting. I'll let him articulate that.
So Alderman Arnett, so what we're finding is that not only are the vehicles not secured, but they're leaving the spare keys to the vehicles inside of the car. So, I mean, we've been speaking about this and putting this on social media to ad nauseum, about securing your cars, taking all your valuables out. We put the VMS signs on Ryle and Forest Drive. We put it on our social media accounts. We continue to talk about this. So the short answer to your question is that not only are valuables left in these vehicles, but the spare keys to operate these vehicles are also being left inside of the taken vehicles.
So
Something else that needs to be investigated, and I'm not prepared to talk about that tonight, but we find too a lot of these vehicles are gained entry by electronic devices. So many of these vehicles like computers now, and you can clone them, and you can buy devices to circumvent the ignition part of it. And you can go to electronic stores and buy it. And if you know what you're doing, just like a computer geek can, tap into. You see a lot of that now because a lot of these dashboards are computers, and that's something that really legislatively needs to be investigated.
that is very interesting information, because that tells me this isn't a crime of opportunity. I mean, if you're there with an electronic device, you've thought this through, you've purchased the device, and in that case, it doesn't matter whether I have a fob and lock it. I don't keep a spare key in the vehicle, but where can we go to get a little more detail on this to propagate it out to our residents?
Well, I have my good captain here, and they know every time they come to this table, it's potential for more work. So I have my captain to research that, and we'll get it back to you. But I also want to say this too, that you can tell your constituency too. I tell people all the time when I speak to groups, scan your environment. Simply means when you get out of your car, look around and make sure that everything's locked, because you never know who's watching you. Most criminals are watching their victims. They're watching you leave expensive items. You got that Louis Vuitton purse and Christmas Day. That's a train wreck waiting to happen. You get excited and you just throw the purse in there because you don't want to take the whole thing in there. And you see your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, and you get to talking. And next thing you know, you're in the bar drinking. And you come out, then it becomes our problem because the vehicle wasn't. But somebody's watching. And so I tell residents all the time, just take a complete look around and check your doors, and don't assume that everything is locked. It helps a lot.
Thank you for that information. We don't want to be number one in any category, but I was shocked at how many of these cars are actually locked and still stolen. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir. And a lot has to do literally with technology. You'd be surprised. we'll go to the gun violence, and that's the bane of my frustration. And I think it's even more frustration for the residents because nobody likes errant
Excuse me,
and
Chief,
stray bullets.
Alderman Gay has a
Oh,
question
I'm sorry.
past
I'm
line.
sorry,
That's fine.
Alderman. Please accept my apology.
No, you're totally fine. I just wanted to address. I see some people in the audience like, no, this is travesty, or maybe possibly disagreeing with what you were saying. This, if you wouldn't mind going back to the last slide. Particularly, I'm talking about the theft and motor vehicle theft, which they're first and fifth, and I think it's, to me personally, it shows that the Annapolis Police Department has obviously been doing a commendable job.
Thank you, sir.
You look at high crime or high populations area with wealth and our neighboring jurisdictions, the car theft is through the roof, in particular amongst juvenile crime offenders. And so I think this goes to speak to both our residents being precautious and aware of what's going on, and both the police department being precautious and aware of what's going on. And then obviously I just want to, on the other side, crime against persons side, obviously commend you all there, because I know that our ward in particular leads in a lot of this, but the most complaints you get are from wards 1 and 8, which are dead last in homicide and crimes against person. And so, you know,
Well, thank you, sir.
It's just put things into perspective. When the numbers
Yes,
come
sir.
out, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And so thank you all for
Yes, sir.
continuing to do the work. It's not perfect. It's 22 motor vehicle thefts, one too many. Is 89 thefts from a business or an individual, one too many, absolutely. But I think just putting in the grand scheme of things is to be commended.
Thank you, sir. And I'll say this real quick. And thank you so much for that. You know, crime was down 67% last year. That's phenomenal. I challenge anybody, look at any American city, small or large, when crime was down so low. I told my staff just today that our challenge for 2025 is, first of all, law enforcement. The public has to come to the reality. Law enforcement is reactionary. We want people to have freedoms. We don't want to stop everybody that moves because we don't like the way they look. We know where that gets us. That's a train wreck waiting to happen. And we want people to have their civil liberties. In a free society, not to get philosophical, we don't know what people are going to do next. It's impossible. And so I told my staff today, from my deputy chief on down, our biggest challenge coming off of a 67% reduction in crime is, what this doesn't talk about up here is the arrest. Most of these people are accounted for, the criminals. And either they sat over on Jennifer Road to see a court commissioner, or they are or trial is pending. The vast majority of crime in Annapolis is solved. So I told my staff that what impressed me the most, not so much the numbers are down, because it's an inherently reactionary job. Once it comes to our attention, I love the response that the Annapolis PD gave last year to crimes. I mean, discharges where nobody was struck, non-contact shootings. For the most part, those people were identified, and they were relentless in pursuing the people that's responsible. And that's all you can really ask. So I appreciate your remarks, Alderman. I really do.
I will add, because for every praise there is a, the only thing I really do, and this maybe is just Ward 8 in general, I really do think, and there's no statistic to track, and the Alderwoman has told me there may be legal things. I don't know. Other people told me there may be legal concerns as well. The overdoses. And, because that should be contributing to the homicide factor, which I think would significantly increase the number of homicides that we have, because right now we're only counting off of, obviously, like physical homicide or shooting, or, like blunt trauma force or something like that. And overdoses are murder to me. The incidents that have happened in Eastport, obviously, over the last couple of weeks and over the last couple of years have been pretty concerning to me, because we're getting into this theme now where they're like group overdoses, and particularly with older adults of like 50 plus and African American. Unfortunately, we've seen it in the Ward 2. We've seen it in my ward, obviously. And unfortunately, some of those lead to fatalities. I think you all should start recording. I don't know if that's a federal statistic because I know you just switched over to following the
NABRAS, the National Incident-Based Reporting
and you were
System.
using a uniform crime before, was it?
Yeah, we used the uniform crime reports at first. But to your point, the law provides for that. I think even in Maryland, if you can show that a person deliberately put fentanyl out on the street, know what the end results could be, I think that lends to
is
intent.
What I'm getting to,
And that we have to, and I know they can be held accountable, not just for drug distribution.
and that's what I would like to get to at some point. And I know there are ongoing investigations. Please don't speak on anything right now. But at some point, I'd like to see, like, I think that if, you know, because I've been very lenient in the past when it comes to, in particularly, like, you know, drug or crime of an economic circumstance. You know, obviously people steal, people sell drugs, people do all of those things because they need to provide for themselves, and whether it has to do with their social or economic or educational background, etc. But now it's to the point where, you know, obviously the fentanyl has been introduced, in particularly to Annapolis, at a much higher rate. And what I believe this year, I'm only going off of what I believe. There's been nothing released from the police or fire department. And so I'd like to see us, one, cracking down, obviously, on the individuals that are selling it and counting those as homicides. I used the example of Michael K. Sterling in New York. When he was killed, they went and found the individual that sold him the drugs, and they charged him with homicide. When Demi Lovato overdosed, they went and found the person and charged them with attempted homicide. So what's different in our...
Well, let me say this. The word homicide in and of itself is when one human being dies at the hands of another. Absence of murder or manslaughter.
Okay.
So we could count them. No, I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. The word homicide is the act. It varies from state to state. Now, if I sold the captain fentanyl, knowing that it was laced, and you could somehow prove that I knew that was a deadly dose, then I would agree. My definition is that I've committed a homicide. It's up to the legislature to determine whether it should be first-degree murder, second-degree murder, you know, voluntary or involuntary manslaughter. But the deputy chief, before I forget, said something that I don't know if he realized I heard him, but he was talking to, I believe it was Captain Howard a few weeks ago, and he said, look, when we get these overdoses, let's not just take the report. Let's try to find out where it came from. You remember that? And I was delighted. I don't know if he knew that I heard him, but I overheard him sitting in my office. And I said, that's what I'm talking about. And that's when you know that a police department, in spite of its challenges, you know, is focused on doing its job, because the deputy chief said to the captain, I believe, let's challenge these guys. If there's any investigative leads in terms of where the person may have gotten the drugs from. Sometimes that's hard to do because it's all over the place. A person can buy fentanyl-laced marijuana, coke, or heroin, whatever. They lace everything with fentanyl now. They could buy it in Anne Arundel County. They can buy it in Glen Burnie, theoretically, come into Annapolis and collapse, or even ingest it in another jurisdiction. Come here and collapse.
Just so that we can close out here, because I don't want to hold this too long. Is the issue you have to find specific intent, like the person almost absolutely has to know that this was, you know, some sort laced with some sort of fentanyl, and then it becomes the objective of the investigating authority to prove that the individual that was selling knew and had intent to kill. Is that for homicide, or can you do? You mentioned like first, second, you know, involuntary manslaughter, all of those things. What? I guess I'm asking, you know, at what length does our police department go to in charging?
Well, I instruct my guys to say, for example, real quick, and I'll be brief. If officers theoretically investigates a overdose, and say we see it on CCTV, and we say, oh, that's John Jones, you know, that lives on Clay Street, and we've been looking for him, and we see him distribute the substance, and then the person ingests it and collapses, then we would get all that information together and take it to the state's attorney. And in all probability, it would go to a grand jury, and they would determine to what level of responsibility leave it generally up to us. But that's how I would like to see it
But
happen.
what would you charge it as though? Because the department has to charge it, right? And then they'll figure out if they will.
Not necessarily. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Just to interject, I've been looking it up. There's actually a bill that's before the General Assembly right now that would make it easier to charge individuals for any fentanyl or heroin overdoses. So
Yeah.
if it's a drug, if it's a supplier and then someone dies as a result of it, they can be charged, and it carries up to a conviction of up to 20 years.
Right.
So it has bipartisan support right now. So let's say it passes, it would be a lot easier for the police departments to then charge, because now they just have to show that who the dealer was once someone has ingested fentanyl, let's say, and has passed away from it. And it's, I don't know if I said this, so I might be repeating myself, but it's holds a conviction of up to 20 years.
Right,
It's
but
called a
the-
drug-induced homicide is
I
the term.
appreciate it. If you could send that, that'd be grateful. I
will do that.
Maybe we send testimony. I don't know.
But just
If it's-
in
if we're
addition to what
passionate about
Kerry just articulated, we could always take the facts before a prosecutor and then let them take it to a grand jury, or they can even charge as well based on the information we provide. It's just so complex that I haven't seen a pattern of us charging people for overdoses, but it can be done.
Just real quick, but what the chief talked about in reference to the conversation I had with the captain, it's a practice that we have always had. I just reemphasized that because we had a double overdose, one which was fatal, to make sure that we double down on getting that evidence. So we make sure that we collect the electronic devices there. We make sure we have trace evidence there to determine, is there a signature as to where this stuff come from. We have a big input from our federal partners, also who dumps all that information to a database. And as it pertains to charging, even though the state's attorney do have a role in that, the first thing we have to do is provide the medical examiner with some information that they would make the ruling to become a homicide.
Yes, that's all. I think it's a good question, excellent question, and a conversation that needs to be had. And based on that legislation, which I didn't even know, thank you, then we'll have to revamp our whole policy to reflect that. So it's my prayer that that legislation passes during this legislative session.
Ms. Berger, where in the pipeline is that legislation over there?
I'm looking that up now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say to the department, I'm not questioning any intent or whatever or anything like that.
No, sir, it's a good question.
Yeah, or anything previously. I just, because I get worried because we hear that like those when there's groups. And that's happened more than one time when there's been like 3 or more individuals, and I know people, they're doing experimental parties and all of this stuff. Whatever it is, nonetheless, if you kill somebody, I think it's a homicide. I know there's different definitions and intent and all of that stuff, but yeah, thank you so much.
About 36, 37 years ago, when Len Bias died on the campus at the University of Maryland in College Park, the Prince George's County State's Attorney went after a guy by the name of Brian Tripp for giving him that 8-ball, a mixture of heroin and cocaine that exploded his heart. I remember it like it was yesterday. Why? Because I was a street police 37 years ago. And I remember us having a conversation. And if you go and look up the historical narrative, in those days, people thought that if you were an addict and you purchased drugs, then you were the author of your own fate. You couldn't blame the government or the police or anybody else. And the prosecutor lost re-election for that because many people thought that he shouldn't even have went after Brian Tripp. Brian Tripp, of course, was acquitted because no jury would convict him for selling or exposing, not selling, but giving Len Bias the cocaine. And then last but not least, the argument became he was a high-profile basketball player, an All-American basketball player chosen second in the draft by the Boston Celtics, a very powerful NBA team. And he was Michael Jordan. He was in the same class as Michael Jordan. So he was a celebrity. So the only reason why they went after Brian Tripp is because the celebrity status of Len Bias. I only make that relevant point because I thought that it was a credible argument to start charging these drug dealers for putting this poison in the community. And so now we're finally there. And that's what was so important about your question. I think that's what we should be tracking. Yes, sir. Yes. 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 Yeah. Very make you want to cry. But every citizen who has the disease of addiction should be protected from people putting their poison out, whether you're a celebrity or not. But yeah, I saw that. It was very sad. I guess our last category, Ward 8, the gun violence and contact shootings. We had one, and that was on the border with Alderman Gay's ward. That's at Madison and President Street. And that accounts for a lot of the addiction issues. And I thought that Alderman Arnett was right on point when he said that a lot of it because of the border poverty and all the hopelessness that goes along with drug addiction because of his close proximity to Ward 6. Then shots fired, Monroe Street, Warren Drive, President and Jackson Street. Again, we put in parentheses on the border with Ward 6, and that accounts for a lot of it is just right over the border. And then shots fired, again, Park Avenue, so far one this year on the border with Ward 6. So that's the gun violence. But I will sum it up by saying that, again, I'd like to thank the men and women of the APD. They're relentless. We take these discharges seriously. And we have, in this season that we're in America, last time I was here, I kind of articulated my concern because of the politics of this nation. And I don't want to lose our federal partners and these task force officers that we were able to send to the feds, our APD officers that we were able to detail to the federal government to work on these collaborative gun violence initiatives. Because what I'm not hearing in the American discourse right now is that we have to do something about these cities. Gun violence hasn't slowed down. And so I'm praying that we will be able to continue to have our federal partnerships. They like working with Annapolis. Myself and Captain Howard attended about 3 weeks ago. We went into Queen Anne's County to go to an FBI briefing, and they wouldn't mind me saying this. And we talked about those very things, amongst other things. Queen Anne's County Sheriff's Department hosted the event, and we met with our federal partners, multi-jurisdictions, and they assured us that in this area that the federal initiatives are still going to take place. So I was happy to hear that, and I pray that they do.
Good to know. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A specific question about this slide and then a general comment. All of these incidences, except for Warren Drive, make sense to me. Warren Drive is not bordered with Ward 6. Is that party house that we've been having problems with for years?
I know the house you're referring to.
Yeah, it wasn't that house.
It wasn't. I know the house you're referring to, but that I don't think it was either.
That gentleman since moved out of that house.
Right. Yes.
He no longer, I don't want to skip his name, but he no longer lives there.
Right. But I know the house you're referring to.
Because I now have a new neighbor that lived next door to him who's moved to my street because of the party house. I want to follow up what Alderman Gay said, and the chairwoman I know believes this, but we do thank you. Particularly, you haven't mentioned two things. You're doing this police work severely understaffed.
Yes, sir.
And that's a continual problem. I don't know how we're ever going to solve that. But the other thing you haven't mentioned is you have a pretty good conversion rate. We're catching a lot of these people. It doesn't help the victim of the crime because it's after the fact, but it does show good police work. So
Thank
I
you,
want
sir.
to mention
you.
that and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Specifically.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Arnett. Alderman Gay.
Here I am, the one that said I wasn't going to ask too many questions. But this is so important, the work that you all do. And so that's why you have to just lock in when you have an opportunity to. To your point, why don't we release imperative details as it relates to crime like other jurisdictions? I think that's the one thing that may really boil my blood with the Annapolis Police Department, both after the fact and before the fact. Before the fact, I'll use the example of I know like there'll be incidents where like, you know, you have a vehicle in mind and they'll hold off on it because they're like, oh, we don't want to alert the criminal or whatever. And I'm like, well, in every other jurisdiction I see, they find the vehicle, you know, maybe they have internal discussion for a couple of hours, but it becomes public knowledge at some point. So before the crime, that's my only concern. Just the amount of public knowledge that we actually release.
And we're working on that with our new PIO. I shared with my deputy chief, it has been a culture here. The only time we should withhold information is if it compromises the case. If it compromises public safety, then we need to let the public know. I think it's irresponsible to withhold information. For example, we have somebody running around with a gun. I want the description to go out. We have a vehicle that is responsible for robberies. I want every citizen in Annapolis, whether they're up at the Safeway or they're at the Giant, I don't care where they're at, they need to know. An informed public is a public that can better protect themselves, especially against violent crime. So I'm agreeing with you in the sense that we have to mitigate that. We're training Cortland now to understand that. So before I put him out there on TV, I want to make sure to give him a fair chance to grow and learn about crime and learn what to say and what not to say. But you never withhold information to the public where the public can be sacrificed in order to solve a case, if that makes sense.
It does. And I mean, the one very, very good example of when you all were very, it was reactive to the situation, but you all were proactive with the information. The incident that happened at the Safeway with the young woman or, you know, whatever happened there. I thought it was great. The information was out to the public. Everybody knew it was going. It was on Facebook, Twitter, everywhere immediately. And, you know, I'm assuming that the public was able to, you know, weigh in, but you all probably had investigatory tips ahead of time. And then afterwards, one thing I'd like to see, just as the alderman had mentioned, I know personally, because you all have told me like, oh, there was a, you know, shooting on X date. There was no target or whatever, but we found the guy with the gun. The public needs to know that. Not because I care about the public, you know, being involved in an individual's personal case with a judge, but because I want the public to know that you are all doing a very, very good job. I think that's the common misconception, is that like, oh, this happens and it's very quiet. You know, they're probably not investigating. They don't care. And it's like, really, you've already arrested the person or you've got some sort of lead on the individual. And I mean, and I get it, you know, you got to be careful with, you know, how you relay information. But I think that's my only personal criticism is just how we release information and the time and what we do. And I thank you for bringing up that question, because it's more important because you're doing the job, not because we don't think you're doing the job. So.
Yes, sir. And we're ready to send Cortland, what is it, next week?
Yeah.
I think it's next week we're ready to send him to a very good PIO school. And so he'll be prepared to address all of that. Because I agree with you. I get frustrated sometimes because we haven't told the entire story. And we're doing, I think, what the public expects us. But if we don't get the information out, then the public will assume what they assume based on the information that they had. And we can't blame the public for that. We have to blame ourselves, because absence of the information, they'll make the assumption as to what's going on as opposed to what's really going on. So I hear you. And we have Cortland Jackson now, new PIO, is going to attend a workshop. And we've been spending a lot of time with him to make sure that he understands completely what his role is.
Alderman Gay, do you get the daily report that we put out daily?
I get the report from whatever the automated. I don't know if I get the whatever I signed up. You know, obviously, or they signed us up for. Is that the same one? Okay, yeah. They signed us up in the beginning for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So each morning, whatever crime happened the previous day, we make sure that information go out. It may not be to the specifics that you're looking for. We may be missing something in there. Also, when we make an arrest, it goes in that report too. So maybe we need to add more to that, but we do send something out for crime that's reported in the city of Annapolis each day, so the public should know exactly what's being committed each day.
So I think Alderman
can I use
Arnett and yourself
general-
is, because both alluded to it, it's that stuff that we haven't made an arrest, but to get the information, is like a PSA, a public safety announcement to let people know that these are the trends going on. We do it well at Christmas time, but we should do it all year long.
Alderman Arnett?
Sorry, one more time, because I'm anxious to hear from fire. But I did get criticism from a constituent when there was an FBI search in the neighborhood, and it made me wonder. This constituent wanted to have real-time alert and shelter in place and things like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. Yeah, a lot of times we want it too. And a lot of times, and I tell people this, and I don't mean to sound sarcastic, but people don't realize that the federal government has authority here. And some of these are their investigations and not ours. And I tell people, I told a constituent Saturday, Annapolis is still the United States. And so when they come in with federal warrants duly signed by a federal magistrate judge or a federal district court judge, then they can either give us the courtesy of notifying us or just come in. And so they just came in the other day. And I'm not, I love my federal partners, but they don't always alert us. And then they have their reasons, I guess.
Thank you for elaborating, because that complaint went out to a listserv of 14,000 people.
Yes, sir.
It's good to get this information on the record.
Yes, sir. And I'm just going to give you an example. Saturday, I was asked the questions. I called my deputy chief, and he didn't know. And he didn't know. And Amy was the one that knew. Amy was the only one that knew. Yeah. And so we were just as frustrated with that because I had no answers. I like to give some kind of answer, but I had no answer. Mm-hmm.
Do we have any questions from the public? Mr. Wright, you can come on up to the podium, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
On behalf of the Eastport Civic Association, hate to
Is
have
my
you-
phone-
we had a couple of comments and questions on a number of the topics that you mentioned this evening. Okay. Let me start with the question of communication with the public. First of all, I'll tell you that our experience up until probably the last 6 to 7 months has been that our communication with the police department regarding the severity, or I guess the expansion of information about things that people already knew were in the works. Now, let me give you an example of that. Shots fired, that type of incident. It was very important to our members and citizens of Eastport to understand how that was being classified. In other words, were these targeted shootings? Were they random shootings and all of that? So we had the ability, we feel, up until about 6 months, maybe more, to be able to pick up the telephone. I remember talking to Captain Maguez, who has always been very responsive to us, and Captain Kleindens when he was here. We could just pick up the telephone. We had developed that kind of relationship. And the kinds of things we were asking was, can you give us a little bit more information so that we can disseminate it to our members and put this thing in perspective? Because as you well know, a number of these incidents lead themselves to rumor and rumor upon rumor and, all through social media and so forth. So the bottom line is we don't feel we have that right. And so I was very interested to hear about the new PIO. Is the PIO going to be the point person for us? That's my question.
Yes, sir. Any of my command staff can be a point person to include myself, but the PIO will be available and he'll probably do it primarily. That's the way it should be run anyway. And then we're going to get a new chief of patrol very soon. and he'll be available. Right now, I have the good Captain Howard, trying to do both, run the detective and special squads, in addition to helping out the acting captain, which is Lieutenant Joseph Mann, who's doing a very good job. He really is. But he's a lieutenant, and it's kind of overwhelming. I think the learning curve has been good with acting captain Joe Manns. So in short time, we'll do a better job. But then also, a lot of things, or some things, I put a halt to, because it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, that as long as public safety is not compromised, I don't mind sharing as much as I can. But then secondarily, I don't want to put things out there that we haven't verified. And then we have our other partner, which is the state's attorney. State's attorney called me recently and said, you got to be careful what you put out, because if the case is going to come to me, I don't want it tried in the neighborhoods. I want it based on evidence. So it's a very fine line to walk. I'm not a professional PIO. That's why we want so very badly to have a well-trained PIO that can sit down when it's not in my best interest or the best interest of the APD or my command staff to comment on certain things. But surely, Mr. Riker, you can always pick up the phone. I'll gladly talk to you.
I'll call
in
you.
person. Yes, you can call my office, and yes, sir, and I'll gladly talk to you.
Okay.
Important.
All right.
You all are very important. So, Eastport Civic Association is very important and been good partners. So we'll make sure that information continues.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And let me just say, as you probably know, Chief Jackson, there have been a couple of incidents in the last couple of years where either you or I, or maybe it was Captain Kleinenst and I, we collaborated on language, actually. You know, we agreed on language that would be released in certain incidents. And what we're looking at is, putting it out in the newsletter, or at least corroborating it with the police department to avoid the rumor mills and the problems that everybody suffers because of that. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And you're right. You're bringing up a very good point in that the fear of crime can be just as crippling as the actual offense itself. Exactly. So I agree.
Yeah.
And public safety is very important. Public safety differs from law enforcement in that when people walk outside their door, a good and well-run police department makes them feel that their neighborhoods and their communities are safe. So I do understand exactly what you're saying.
Thank you. But with your indulgence, I had 2-3 other points. Is that
Mr.
okay?
Riker, take as long as you need to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me just say, your Coffee with a Cop program is terrific. I participated in that about 3 weeks ago. I met with 3 of your officers, Corporal and 2 others, and it was extremely enlightening. And I want to just share with you and the committee some of the things we talked about. First of all, the cameras. As you well know, you and I worked together with the city to try to get those cameras put up and operating and so forth. And the question was, well, how are they being used? How are you guys in the patrol cars actually using these cameras in your work? So what I learned from that was on the question of, are the cameras a deterrence, which was one of my questions, the answer was no. They really aren't. It seems that if the bad guys are going to do what the bad guys do, they really don't care whether they're on tape or not. Okay, maybe they're not that smart, but they're just not. So it's really not a deterrence, except for people maybe like you and me. Mm-hmm. The way they do use the cameras, we learned, is in investigation and in pursuit, for example. So the camera operator, if they're able to get a license tag number or a face or something like that, they're able to take a screenshot and get that to the patrol officer. So we were able to learn a lot about that. Mm-hmm. It was different. What I'm pointing out, that it was different than the way the public initially thought about those cameras. So my point is, it was good to know, but it's also good to know to have the public really understand how these things are being used by the police department, by the officers in the patrol cars, and that was very enlightening. So I want to pass that on to you.
Yes, sir. And the only element missing is that, and I don't want to get myself in trouble, but I wish that the courts were stronger partners for the deterrence piece when we had that. Not necessarily talking, Mr. Reichert, incarceration, but some of these, the courts have a lot of power to mandate people to do certain things. Like a lot of them is drug addiction. You have an addict, to support their habit, they're going to break in cars and they're going to take things out because they can't, the average addict is not a multimillionaire entertainer. They're just everyday people who lost their jobs, lost their ability to cope. They've lost a whole lot of things. The only way they can sustain a drug habit is to commit crimes. And, the courts can command them to get into programs and things of that nature. So you're seeing a lot of hopelessness. And the most dangerous man or woman that you can encounter, law enforcement or citizens alike, is a person who feels that they have absolutely nothing to lose. And I can say with a high degree of confidence, that's what American law enforcement is facing right now. And I just hope, I'll be glad when we get past this period of this hopelessness, because cameras are not a deterrent in far too many cases.
Yeah. I want to share with you a little bit about, I asked all of the officers, I said, we have a pretty large civic association here in Eastport and fairly active. And I said, if there's anything, and I'm going to get an opportunity to talk to some members of the city council today. So this was 3 weeks ago, but I said, if there was anything you needed or wanted that you thought we could advocate for, what would that be?
Well,
and the answer was, the answer they gave was, give us more manpower. Okay. And I said, well, people have really been trying hard on that. They've been trying a lot of different things. And it certainly is foremost in the minds of the city council and so forth. But I said, how did you get here? Why did you join the Annapolis Police Department instead of Anne Arundel or someplace else? And they said, word of mouth. They said the single most effective, in their view, it was very interesting, the single most effective way to recruit police officers for the city of Annapolis was word of mouth through the Baltimore City Police Department. Every single one of them, well, there were three, but all three of them said, that's how I heard about it. I heard about that from some guy who worked down here or had a connection here and thought this was a good place to live. So I'm passing that on, and maybe you already know that, but it was very interesting to me. And I said, the second thing is, there's a lot of discussion in our city about affordable housing for people like you, police officers, teachers, nurses, and so forth. And I said, for the sake of this question, let me ask you, if there was good affordable housing here in the city of Annapolis, would you live in the city of Annapolis? Not a single one of them would. I said, absolutely not. And it was,
Wow.
And that was intriguing. And it was, there were a variety of reasons, okay? But one of them said, I have a wife and 2 kids. And if I moved into the city of Annapolis, I don't want my kids going to school with the kids of the parents I arrested the day before, which I thought was really kind of insightful, okay? And that was not an issue that had anything to do with affordable housing. Now, in fairness, each had a different reason, but none of them said they particularly were interested in living in the city. They really like you. You've got the patrol officers are now on 12 on, 12 off.
Yes, sir.
Is that really like that? They really like that, and they're concerned. I think Anne Arundel's going to that soon, like in a few months, isn't it? And so they had expressed a little concern that if Anne Arundel goes to that, it may provide them more competition than there already exists.
Well, I'll say this, Mr. Riker, real quick. I'd like to have and we can schedule it. I'd like to sit down and talk to you about that dynamic. I'm a former sociology professor, and I argue about that type of mentality. I think police should be civic leaders. And I think it's sad when law enforcement officers feel that they can't live in the jurisdiction where they work. I think that that's what's a matter with a lot of American cities, that your first responders are not a part of the community. But we'll talk about that offline. And
But let me tell you, these guys were absolutely first top rate, you know, and very much appreciated being here, thought they got good training. Happy to be here. Okay, so passing that on. Let me move on because I just have a couple of more points. You're
Yes, sir.
aware of the emergency safety and security grant that is currently being the applicant by HACA? Okay. it's
Yes, sir. I
ready.
signed off on it today.
Yeah, did you? Okay.
sir. This morning.
This is, I'm sure City Council knows about this. This is a grant being applied to by HACA from HUD. So we're in communication with Melissa Maddox Evans on that. And they needed police data by this week as an adjunct to
That's been
that.
provided. Yes,
And that's
sir.
being provided.
It has been.
Excellent.
The letters of support has been signed and the data was
Terrific.
provided.
Okay. So just wanted to check with you on that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The website. We have a safety committee that's fairly active, and we wanted to pass on that the police website is, it's not user-friendly, let me put it that way, in terms of digging into data. We found it to be a little awkward. Some of it's out of date. Some of it talks about neighborhood watch programs, which haven't existed in this city for a long time.
I want that to start back up, but
Oh,
we should say
okay.
it's not up. Yeah, but you're right.
So to be continued. But we, you know, if there's anything we can do to help you or to talk about the structure of communication through the website, we're happy to do it. But
Yes, sir.
right now, the website needs some work.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. And
Thank you, Mr. Wright. We really
Thank
do
you.
appreciate it, as always. Oh, Alderman Gay, you have a
Thank you.
question?
Yeah, who's the hire? Who does hiring? But who? No, who? There has to be a panel, or is it just singular?
Well, you can speak to that, Amy.
So we work with human resources for the city, but I have one officer who works on hiring. There's a number of officers that assist doing background investigations and a number of officers that assist going to recruiting events. We do go to a lot of recruiting events around the state.
Which I think is great. I did see one at my alma mater. It's not technically my alma mater because I still have 19 credits left. But shout out to UMES. I did see you all posted up there. My question: when there is a department like the Baltimore Police Department that, you know, got documentaries and all this chaos surrounding it, when you investigate that, how far do you go?
We go through their whole internal affairs history. We look at every single piece that's in their internal affairs file at any department they ever served in.
And am
It's
I
part of the law.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to get a better understanding of that because I know in some instances, and again, this is where I expect the expertise of the department to correct me and what I'm assuming, where an individual, an officer could do something at X department, be let go there or terminated or whatever, and then they could just go to another department in neighbor's jurisdiction. Is that
There's a national registry
now?
that Maryland is mandatory to use that registry.
How
Not
new is
every
that, or is
state.
that-
Yeah, we flag them. They're flagged in the system.
Yes, so under the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, not only is there the registry, and that may have pre-existed that, but now anyone who's applying to the Annapolis Police Department has to certify their prior departments and also has to give authorization to the department to get their entire personnel record.
Right.
And in addition to that, and that includes internal affairs. In addition to that, if someone were to leave a Maryland jurisdiction under investigation for serious misconduct,
be
things like
flagged.
excessive use of force,
Right.
discrimination, harassment, false statement, veracity type of allegations, their certification is automatically revoked under the Maryland Police Training Commission, so they could not get another law enforcement job, at least within the state of Maryland. And that is not contingent on the outcome of the investigation. The investigation can be ongoing, and if they resign while it's pending, it still revokes their certification. And then certainly if there's a sustained finding, that also revokes their certification.
I greatly appreciate you for explaining that. just to there's any curiosity amongst others, why are we hiring so many people from Baltimore in there? Are
It's
they
a
involved in
huge-
anything? You know,
It's a huge department, and there's a lot of good people there that maybe want to move on to somewhere else.
And we've seen an increased amount of men and women, mostly men, have come from Baltimore City Sheriff's Department, not the police department. Here lately. We've hired quite a few ex-sheriff's deputies. And ultimately, Captain Miguez prepares a report for me, and I have the deputy to look at it, and then really I strongly hire them based on the recommendations from my command staff, and then I'll appoint them. And sometimes I'll even discuss, if it's something that concerns me, I do read those backgrounds, and I'll bring Captain Miguez in or the deputy chief, because they're the primary two that read it after Detective Murphy has forwarded the information. And, you know, it's been times that I've brought the people in and I wanted to see them and ask them questions myself. And then if I'm satisfied that they're a good fit, then we go ahead and hire them.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience have a question or comment or concern? Please step up to the microphone, give your name and address. That's the purpose here tonight. Even if you live in Ward 8 or not in Ward 8, it doesn't matter. Because I see at least one out there who does it, but that's okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Annapolis Police Department. Commander.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the list, ID 3525, Annapolis Fire Department, update AFD. And we have Chief O'Malley.
Yeah. To the PowerPoint for me.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. See if we can get this up.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. Thank you so much.
Doing a fine job. There we go. Good evening, Doug O'Malley, Fire Chief. Before we start, I would say we are proud to say that at the end of January, we graduated 3 firefighter EMTs from the Prince George's County Fire Academy. They are now out on the street. Recently this month, we were promoted 3 firefighter first class. They're going through their officer development program and they're on the street. And as of Thursday of last week, we hired 4 firefighter EMT recruits that have started at the Anne Arundel County Fire Academy. All these are replacements for retirees and people that have moved on to other jurisdictions. So we're here to talk about Ward 8. We'll go over some citywide statistics. We'll talk about some operational challenges. We don't have a whole lot of them in this ward, but we can talk about them and then strategic plan.
One thing before you go on, Chief O'Malley, I just want to let everyone know in January when we focused on Ward 1, we did do an overall statistical assessment and evaluation of the entire 2024. So that's already been done. So if you want to see that, you can go back to the meeting in January. Thank you, Chief.
And this is just citywide statistics for last year. We ran over 13,000 calls for service. 75% of those are EMS-related calls, and that's what we do on a daily basis. We take sick and injured people to the hospital. We respond to fires and other incidents as needed, but the majority of what we do in the Annapolis Fire Department is EMS-related. Look, I'm jumping forward. So Ward 8, For last year, we ran 863 calls for service there. You can see how it relates to the other wards in the city, and you were the third least busiest ward that we responded to. So far this year, out of the 1,500 responses, we've had 106 in Ward 8. I will say that we are missing some data over the last couple of weeks because of a data issue that we ran into with our reporting system, and we're working on resolving that currently. So Chief Powell likes to point this out, that you can see our fire loss for the last 3 years. In 2024, we had a very good year. I knock on wood every time I look at that. So fire loss in the city of Annapolis last year was not extremely high. We did not have a lot of major fires. We hope to continue that trend, and it's been since 2010 was the last fatal fire in the city of Annapolis, and that's another statistic I don't like to talk about too much because we know we're close.
Chief Alderman Gay has a question.
What was the 2023 that just had it peak and to almost 3 million?
I would have to go back and look, but that would be several fires throughout that year. So that's not one just major loss. Obviously, we can have $1 million fire. We could have that tomorrow, depending on the business and the occupancy. But that year, we just was a high year for working structure fires in the city of Annapolis.
Thank you.
Yep. So for your ward, operational challenges are minimal for us. The biggest concern we run into is the tight streets in the lower end of Eastport with parking on both sides of the street. We've done a lot to combat that. Years and years ago, there was a study done with the community and the city looking at that. There were some recommendations about making some streets one way, not parking on the side of the road. We realized that any parking we take away from any community in Annapolis, it's difficult because most recent or over the last several years, most residents they have more than one car. So you have an occupancy, more than likely there's more than one car associated with that. But with that, we've gone to smaller fire engines. We went back to city pumpers, as we call them. They're shorter wheelbase to help us get around. As you see, our ladder trucks or tiller ladder trucks, they bend in the middle to help us get around the tight streets. And the medic units, too, we've gone to smaller medic units. There, we know that this ward is primarily residential and retail with some light commercial areas. We also know that this area has a lot of marinas and waterfront properties and boats in there. But with that, like I said, we don't run into a lot of challenges there. You know, we have a fire station that's right there. The Eastport Fire Station is right there in the city of Annapolis. I would say that any of the residents that live in the area, if they get an opportunity, they should take a look at the memorial that's out front of the fire station. As far as I can remember going back, even as a kid walking from downtown to my house, that in front of the Eastport Fire Station, people would always cut across the grass there, and there was a dirt path that was there for years. I'm talking 30 years plus. If you go by there now, you will see that the work that was done, there's actually brick sidewalks. The city came in and put a sidewalk down on the Jefferson Street side to the rear, and the memorial that's out there for the men and women of the Annapolis Fire Department to recognize what they've done over the years is nice. It's about 90% done. It's missing a few plaques that they're still working on getting that done, but that memorial out front is nice. So the landscape in front of the station is improved for the Eastport community. And actually, everybody that's walking through there, it's traveled quite a bit, and I think they enjoy that. There's actually a water fountain out front where people can fill their water bottles and actually get water for their dogs also. So we're proud to be part of the community and be part of that community fire station there. With that, I'll just move on a little bit just to talk about in July of 22, the council approved funding for a new fire engine for the Forest Drive Fire Station. We are 2.5 years into it, and I can say as of last week, this is what you can see of the construction of that fire engine. That fire engine costs $720,000. If we were to order this same engine today to go into production, it would still take us 2 to 3 years to get it, and it's $1 million purchase now. This exact same fire engine. So we just wanted to pass that on. We have the same issue with medic units. We have 2 medic units on order. We were hoping that they would go into production the first quarter of this year. They've been on order for 2 years, and well, one's been a year, one's 2 years out, and they haven't even gone to production yet. But those fire engines you see up and down the street, when we say they're custom built, what you're looking at is they are being built custom, piece by piece. We have entered into a strategic plan for the department for our planning cycle. The last one that was done was in 2004, so our strategic plan was pretty old. I will say that Chief Stokes, when he came in, instead of doing a new strategic plan, he did more of a business plan. So we've had plans throughout. It just wasn't a strategic plan. We have gone back and we've got a diverse group, a cross-section with our department. We're using some modeling that's done through the Center of Public Safety Excellence, and we're going to reach out to the community that we serve, and there's going to be some surveys to see what they expect from public safety in the city of Annapolis, especially when it relates to the fire department. So that's all going to go out, and they are putting that together now. They have a time period where they're hoping to have this strategic plan by September. That's a very aggressive plan for as much work that has to be done with it. But we have some people within the department that are really happy to be part of it, and that's so we can look at the future of the department and see where we need to go, especially with the way construction's going. We know that buildings are being built taller now because we don't have too many areas where you can have construction in the city of Annapolis. So we're going to continue to look at that. We look at our staffing levels. Obviously, we would like to meet the national standards when it comes to staffing levels, and that's a challenge for us at times. So we're going to continue to look at that, look at the fire apparatus, and this goes throughout the department. And look at the fire apparatus we have, if that's appropriate, what we're running, how we're doing it, and what the needs are of the public. With that being said, that's about all I have for your ward.
Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, I have some constituents that worry considerably. As you know, Eastport is a favorite place for people to come for Blue Angels, 4th of July, Lights Parade, Tug of War, etc. And it seems over the years we've had variable plans for making sure that the roadways are clear in case there's an emergency. Could you comment on your perspective about how well that plan has worked?
So it's always a challenge for us. I can tell you that between emergency management, the police department, and the fire department, we come together for all these events. A citywide plan is put out. We know the challenges are there. So when we do have the Blue Angels detail, the Eastport of Rockin', and some of the other events down there, because we know it's a problem, we actually put a special events gator down there so that we know we can get to any area down there relatively quickly. It's got a small pump on it in case it's a fire-related incident. It's a challenge. And as you know, for the Blue Angels, they actually restrict parking down there now. If you're not a resident, you're not supposed to be parking down there. The police do a pretty good job. They do a good job as far as I know, and they restrict that. I can not to speak for the police chief, but I know that they get concerns from residents and visitors about limiting that parking. But it's a challenge. We look at each event and we continue to try to address this, but we'll put personnel down there because we know that the area is congested.
So I'm trying to think about what I heard. Is the planning working or not? And
To the best of my knowledge, it is working, but it's a challenge. No matter how we do it, there's that many people in the city, that many cars on the street. It's a challenge for us to get anywhere in the Eastport community there.
It's a challenge to find parking even when there isn't a special
Correct.
event. But I just wanted to make sure that it's working. We want people to be safe, but particularly when our streets are clogged up with traffic and extra parking. So I just wanted to ask that question. I'll carry it back to my constituents.
And that's why we put those special event units in service, the Gator, and actually medics on bicycles so that we can get to them quickly, and then we'll worry about getting them out.
Is there any changing topics? We got the latest SAFER grant a couple of years ago. I mean, are we in any jeopardy of having any clawbacks for any federal money under the current environment?
So the SAFER grant we got was several years ago. That grant is gone. The city has picked up the cost for those individuals. We've maintained those individuals. We applied for a SAFER grant last year for 4 positions to try to put a peak time medic unit in service and up to staffing on the fire apparatus. We didn't get that. We're watching it closely to see how it's going to affect future SAFER grants, and we'll see what's in this year's budget as that goes along. I know that the concerns that also go with those grants about once they are completed, that the city has to pick up those costs. The grants help us get started, but we are concerned about all the federal grants currently, and we are monitoring just like everybody else to see what's going to happen with those grants.
Chief, can you explain what a SAFER grant is?
So that's the firefighter staffing grant that you can, sort of like the police grant that used to be out there, where for the first, depending on how the grant, and it's been done several different ways, but typically it's a 2 to 3 year grant where it picks up the cost, the salaries and the benefits for the new firefighters. And then after that, the city would have to pick it up, but that helps get, with federal funding, get people in here, get us the staffing levels we need to be at, and helps us move forward. And it's just a way to get it started. And that's what the SAFER grant is. So there's also a Fire Acts grant that we put in for every year. We've been very successful over the years to receive that. We were able to upgrade our self-contained breathing apparatus that was getting outdated, and saved a lot of money for the city because we were able to get that grant and replace everything at one time. So we continue to look at those grants and apply for those grants, and we're concerned that they're under jeopardy also. But
I forgot to ask police this, but what percent of your incoming revenue is based on various levels, various kinds of grants?
For the fire department, it's a very low amount. I mean,
That's
it's
a relief.
extremely low amount.
Right.
When we're
Perhaps-
talking the fire grants, they're less than $100,000 grants, and that's just up and beyond anything that you as the council appropriate for us. The biggest grants would be is the staffing grants if we got those, because they're the big grants. But
That's
it's a very low percentage of grants for the Annapolis Fire Department, and the majority of ours, 83% of the budget, city budget for us for the fire department, is all for staffing and benefits.
Thank you. That's a relief. Perhaps we can ask police the same question, but as we're heading into the budget period, I think we're all anxious about what's going to happen to all of the grants, and that could be a big impact on our budget and balancing it this year. But I would say to you the same thing that I said to police, and I would have said to OEM if Mr. Blake Simmons were here. But the number one expectation, I think, of the city residents and businesses is public safety. And I think we're pretty well served. The data continues to show that we're well served, and so thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Before you leave, Chief, Cap McGuez, do you have any information regarding grants this year, or Chief or Deputy? I know you're Chief Administration.
Yes, we have another number of grants. Most are not federal. We currently only have one open federal grant. It's for a low amount, about $70,000. But we do rely on a lot of state grant money. So if that becomes an issue, it'll be more concerning for us. There's the State Aid for Police Protection, the SAP grant that we get. That's about $1.5 million every year. That goes towards salaries. Plus, this is not something that should reduce, as we get money from the county for 911 fees. That goes to equipment in our dispatch room as well as dispatch salaries. So not a huge amount when compared to our total budget, but they are things that are definitely help make the budget work better.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Gay.
Thank you. And this is why I've said every single budget year, it's nothing against any of our public safety departments, but the reality is that if the citizens of the city of Annapolis want independent, standalone public safety agencies, meaning public is a city, fire is a city agency, police is a city agency, OEM is a city agency, cost accumulates. staff increases, the cost of vehicles increase. We just paid 1.8 million for a boat. You know, all of these things, all of those things is critically important for public safety. But I just, you can't have the top-notch public safety teams that we do have and then also not want to pay property tax. That just can't happen. And particularly when 70% of our revenue comes from property tax. And so I get incredibly worried about that. I think you all do a fantastic job, but the budget always concerns me. Is this now my time to ask my 3 quick questions?
Yes.
Thank you. The first is this, do EMT wear body cam?
EMTs do not currently wear body cameras now.
Is that, I'm confused on why they wouldn't.
So some of that has to do with HIPAA.
Okay.
The HIPAA regulations for that, police don't have the same responsibility as we do when it comes to HIPAA violations, which is healthcare violations, because we are sort of a healthcare agency, and because it becomes medical care, that's part of the concern. I know that throughout the U.S., there are some agencies that are looking at it, but I don't know of many agencies out there where the EMTs are wearing the body-worn cameras currently.
Fantastic. And just general. Second, police academy and individuals wanting to get involved in the fire. I actually had somebody like DM me on Instagram a couple of days ago, and they were like, I really want to be with Annapolis Fire Department. How's the advertisement done for the general public to get involved in that? I know a lot of times they are, you should intern. Do they intern with the Eastport Fire Department first, or how do they,
So the Eastport Volunteer Fire Department is a way that if you want to volunteer your time, you could join the Eastport Volunteer Fire Company or the Independent Volunteer Fire Company on Everett Taylor Avenue. That's an option that's there. It's hard to get volunteer firefighters anymore. Because the time that's needed investment. So that's a concern. For us, we have recruiters. We have people that reach out. We actually do go out to the areas. We're not quite as much as the police department because we don't have the openings. And the concern is that when we do recruiting events and you don't have the openings, people get disheartened because of the positions aren't there. They go through this long process and then they get put on a waiting list. And then when we only hire 1 or 2 people, because we are fully staffed currently. I have one. Actually,
the fire department is not understaffed.
I have one office associate position, which the applications are in for now, but all our staffing currently would be filled. But to do that, we continue to get out there. We can also talk offline about some opportunities that we've been looking at in the city to do some things like an internship, but it's still at the early stages.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love to get some sort of public safety internship going on like we did with the city, but it really wasn't as open to public safety, because of concerns, etc. And I hope we get that out of the way. Lastly, good job to whoever is running your social media account, putting out Black History. That was the best thing I've seen. Highlighting firefighters or that I had no idea, were within the department. And I think that's good because the public safety teams in particular are very large. And so we run into new staff all the time. And so I thought that was great, just updating the community on who served within their communities. And thank you for obviously the very, very impactful calls that you are responding to in Eastport Terrace and Harbor House with the overdoses. I just incredibly grateful for all of that. So thank you.
Thanks. We're working hard to increase our public media outreach there. The people that are doing it that's just a collateral duty for them. I've actually been talking with the police chief. They have their new PIO. We're going to also have a PIO where they're going to work together on a daily basis, sort of like a public safety PIO aspect, and make sure that we're getting out as much data as we can to the public about public safety. With that, it's going to also encompass emergency management and doing some of their public outreach too. So we're going to work together. We've talked about that, and we're working to make that happen as you just brought that up, but that's something that we've had meetings on over the last month, and we're working hard to do that. And I would agree that they've done a good job with the social media stuff over the last month and really highlighting some of the members of our department and getting it out there. So thanks for seeing that.
Okay, thank you. I have a question, an inquiry. A couple of people asked me. We all watch the news and television and the fires in California, and now I think it's South Carolina,
South
Myrtle
Carolina.
Beach. What's if we have any vulnerabilities when it comes to fires
So
to that?
we
nature?
always have concerns about wind-driven fires, especially coming off the water. The one thing in California's most recent fires were significant because they reached some areas that weren't used to prone to wildland fires. For us in the city, there's not a lot of grassy areas or wildland areas to get it moving along. But we worry about wind-driven fires. We provide a lot of resources. We put a lot of resources to it, to that type of incident as it occurs, and we evaluate and we send apparatus, and our mutual aid agreements with Anne Arundel County and the United States Naval Academy, Navy District, Washington, help because, if we need additional help, we just call for it and it'll come from there. And then it'll even go farther out from Prince George's and Queen Anne's County. So our mutual aid is robust, and we're very proud of that.
So our vulnerability is pretty low, is what you're saying?
So we always have those concerns, but currently it's not high on our priority list. We're not worried about the vegetation growth around the city that's going to affect a wildland fire like that. You're not going to see a wildland fire like you are seeing in South Carolina and California in the city of Annapolis. Now you could see residential structure fires because of how close our structures are together, especially if the wind's coming in off of the water, and that wind-driven fires concern us. They just had a wind-driven fire last week off of Bestgate Road where 2 houses were on fire and the wind was blowing down the street, and that's a concern. So it is always a concern, but we address it. We look at the fire dangers, and we continue to put resources at it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take this opportunity to say that we have the best, I believe, public safety team with our Office of Emergency Management, Fire Department, and Police Department. It's obvious you all work extraordinarily hard with what you have. You care. I mean, that comes across tremendously when there's one person in stress or in a situation. We are very good at responding to that one situation, even if it's one person. And we do it with a lot of grace and eloquence, and we do it with a sign of caring again about the people that we serve. And that's extraordinarily helpful because public safety is a huge part of the budget. And people want to be able to say we have a good, excellent public safety team because we do put out what we need to put out. We do work together harmoniously. We're not perfect because we're imperfect people. But I do believe, oh yeah, okay, I will. But we do an exceptional job. And a lot of what you do goes unnoticed. One thing I will say about the certain comments about Baltimore City. I mean, I was there for 20 and a half years, and what we've often said is that we've had so many experiences in that jurisdiction until it's not much we haven't seen or experienced or had to deal with. And I think that makes a huge difference when you've had an opportunity to work in a large jurisdiction. It gives you a whole breadth and depth of solving problems, ones that you may or may not see here, but that's extraordinarily helpful. So when you have a group of people that come from many different disciplines and places and all of that, it's extraordinarily helpful in solving any problems that we have here. And that's what we have on all of our public safety teams. And I'm really proud to be sitting and working with you all each and every day. It's a blessing. I will say that. With that being said, we do have 2 more people in the audience. Does anybody going once, going twice have a comment or question? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Alderman Gay, Alderman Arnett. All is well?
Very good job, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, all in favor? Aye. It's 8:21 PM. Thank you all.